Turn that volume up. You know you want it. It's time for Women's Basketball TV with former NCAA champion, WNBA champion, business mogul, and national TV personality, Fran Harris.
A'ja Wilson is a generational talent. We have no one like her in the WNBA.
Let's get it.
So there's a lot happening in WNBA free agency. We're going to continue our conversation about the moves that teams are making, the moves they should be making, and what's happening in the league in 2024. So we started last time talking a little bit about the activity for a couple of players and a couple of teams in my previous video. But today we're going to attempt to go around the league, the 12 teams in 12 minutes. We'll see how we do. So let's start with the Washington Mystics. Mike Thibault has said that he is unapologetically, and that's GM Mike Thibault, used to be the coach for the Washington Mystics, has said that they are unapologetically rebuilding. They are renovating. They are remixing their team, which tells us all that they're going to get rid of some pieces, and they are deciding who they are going to build their team around. From all indication, it's going to be Ariel Atkins, who also just signed a new deal, I think, last year. So you've been looking at Ariel Atkins playing in the Washington Mystics system in a variety of roles. When she came in as a rookie, all rookie team, all WNBA defensive team, had an outstanding rookie season, no question about that. And then they won the championship in 2019, played an integral part of that. And then 2020 was on when we were in the bubble, still playing a big part of that. But for the most part, Ariel Atkins has always been in a supportive role, even though she started her entire career at Washington. But now Mike Thibault is saying that that's a possibility, that we're going to build around Ariel and maybe a couple of other pieces on the Washington Mystics team and see if they can get back to that caliber status where they were in 2019. It'll be interesting because they cored Elena Delle Donne. And so coring her kind of puts her there. She can still make a deal, but it kind of puts her there, and it's a different situation. I think, as I said in my previous video, Elena Delle Donne is ready to go do something else. And candidly, I believe Washington, even though they cored her, I believe Washington really needs to move on from Elena Delle Donne. That's my personal opinion. Team number 2, we talked about Seattle and what the impact will be with Skylar Diggins-Smith. I usually leave her last name off for no other reason than I'm just used to calling her Sky Dig. Skylar Diggins-Smith in in Seattle, what that means for them, what's going to be the impact there. Well, it depends on who else they get. We still know that Nneka Ogwumike is free. We know that in Connecticut, long-range shooter, just had her on my screen. Y'all know who I'm talking about. We know that there are several pieces out there where that Seattle can actually get better, significantly better, after having a pretty rough year, unapologetically rebuilding year in Seattle. Can they get some of the pieces that they need? I like Nneka Ogwumike in Seattle. You got Sky Dig, you got Nneka Ogwumike, you got Jewel Lloyd, and they've got some really strong pieces, but I'm only going to talk about 3 players. The maximum I'll talk about for each team are going to be three players, because typically that's kind of the trio that really becomes the engine for any team. We saw it last year in New York. We've seen it with Houston Comets. We've seen it with the Minnesota Lynx in the past. So I always focus on the 3 players that can really be the signature players for a team. So if Nneka Ogwumike stays out west and goes to Seattle, Seattle's going to be instantly better. Who are we on? So Washington, Seattle. Let's talk about Atlanta. People have talked about why Atlanta is such a great destination place for players, and players are looking to get into Atlanta. Great city. Let's keep it a buck. It's a great city, not an up-and-coming city, as I heard someone say. Atlanta is on the map, and people want to be there for a number of reasons. Talented, heading in the right way in terms of their trajectory. They're going the right direction. They've got great players, great young coach who seems to have a really good connection and rapport with their team. Ownership, leadership seems to value the WNBA franchise there. I hear the WNBA players are treated extremely well there. So people are trying to get into certain cities, and Atlanta is one of those. But then they pick up who? Tina Charles, who, let's keep it a buck, we didn't know we would ever see Tina Charles again. So the rumor, for those of y'all who are new to women's basketball professionally, the rumor was, and nobody in this forum is going to be able to substantiate that because we don't play on the teams, but the rumor, just from being a member of the media and having great relationships in the league, the rumor was that Tina Charles wasn't a great teammate, wasn't a great professional her last few years in the WNBA. So when she wasn't on a team last summer, Nobody was really surprised. Nobody inside the league and the circle and media, nobody was really surprised by that. But we all acknowledge that Tina Charles is a great talent, that in the right situation, she can be very helpful for a team. And I think when I saw her land in Atlanta, I was like, whoa, great. Atlanta needs to get deeper at the post player. They need more veteran leadership. People talk about what Atlanta can and can't be. And I think Atlanta really, they lack very little from a talent standpoint. But what I see when I watched them last season was that they didn't have definitive leadership. I don't know that Tina Charles is the answer to that, because I believe it's difficult, depending on who you are as a player, to come into a team and then all of a sudden be their leader. I know that's difficult, but the presence of someone who's played in WNBA playoffs, the presence of someone who's played overseas, the presence of someone who's been in the league for a long time will definitely be invaluable for the Atlanta Dream. So I like the move of bringing Tina Charles in. When we think of Minnesota, I'm just going around, probably, I don't even have a list, I'm just going off the dome. When I think of Minnesota, one of the great coaches in our league, and Cheryl Reeve, we know that she is a tactician. She's putting her things together. She's making sure that the pieces work for her, and she's done it long enough to know what combination she needs. But when I look at who she picked up from a guard standpoint, I think she got Heidemann from Connecticut. I like the speed. I like the tenacity. I like that she will fit in right where Minnesota kind of left off last year when they made their surprise. Some people were surprised by the run that Minnesota made. And if you're new to WNBA, then Minnesota, not counting the exhibition game, started the season off 0-7, 0-6. They were literally terrible, as Charles Barkley said. And then they ended up making a run in the playoffs. So that says a lot about the culture there. That says a lot about the coaching staff and the organization. So bringing someone in to keep them going in the right direction is certainly something that Cheryl Reeve wanted to do. And she wanted to get younger, a little bit younger at that guard position. Ariel Powers, who's now going to, I believe, Atlanta. Goodness, there's a lot of data in here, y'all. I mean, okay, let me pull this out and let me see, put my glasses on top of my glasses to see what's happening here in terms of Ariel Powers. I was prepared to talk about her because I like her. I liked her. I watched her in the Washington Mystics organization and thought she was such a great fit for the Washington Mystics. And then I was kind of scratching my head a little bit when she went some other places and then ended up in Minnesota, but never really played in Minnesota. So we'll see what happens. I may have to come back to Ariel Powers, but we know that name. We are a big fan of hers. We like the way she plays, extremely passionate guard. And we'll talk about her when I figure out where she is. I'm pretty sure it was like Atlanta, but we'll see. All right, let's talk about the Phoenix Mercury. Phoenix Mercury, interestingly enough, I kind of dig the way the Mercury, the organization, is approaching free agency. So a lot of people are like, when is Diana Taurasi gonna retire? She needs to get out of there. She's 40, whatever she is, she's got to go, right? But DT is still there. And I believe, my personal opinion, nobody's told me this, is that Diana Taurasi, if she makes the Olympic team, will play in her final Olympics and go out the way she wants to go. I don't see Diana Taurasi being forced out anywhere. I mean, let's keep it a buck. So I perceive that she's going to play on the Olympic team if she makes it, because there is a possibility she might not. If she makes it, then she's going to play on the Olympic team, and then that's going to be her swan song this season, and she didn't have to share her final season with Sue Bird's final season. That's how I saw all of that playing out. I didn't think Diana Taurasi was going to not play last season, or that'd be her final season, because Diana Taurasi probably believes that Diana Taurasi should have a proper swan song when she leaves the WNBA. All right. So, but going back to Phoenix, I do like that they are approaching it. They're being aggressive in free agency. They're not saying we're going to rebuild, we're going to retool. They know that they are in that space, but they're not doing a fire sale with their superstars. Brittany Griner, as far as I know, is going to stay in Phoenix. Diana Taurasi is going to be there, and they just signed free agency Natasha Cloud, who came over from the Washington Mystic, which, again, like Elena Delle Donne, I like the move. I think it was time for Natasha Cloud out of St. Joe's, in case you're not familiar. I think it was time for her to move. And as much as people seem to love her in Washington, for me, that whole Washington situation is getting a little stale. It was getting a little stale, and I said that in my previous videos. There's only so long you're going to be able to keep the core of a championship team together. And that's hard for people to understand, and that's hard for people to accept. But it gets stale, and it gets stale within 3 or 4 years after you win a championship. So there has to be a shakeup. You've got to rebuild. You've got to know which assets you have as a team and as an organization, and you have to keep that fresh, or else you end up in a situation very similar to what we're looking at with Indiana, where they are talent, but they can't seem to break out of the cellar. So you want to avoid those kinds of situations by making sure that your team, there's always a fresh revolving door, a smart revolving door of the talent you bring in and the talent that goes out. And I personally believe it was time for Natasha Cloud to leave Washington. I think it was beneficial for both, to be candid with you. So Natasha is in Phoenix. And what I love about the move of Natasha to Phoenix is that most people perceive that Diana Taurasi runs that organization. That's probably a good and accurate perception. But what is not going to happen, which is also going to be great for Phoenix, is that Diana Taurasi is not going to run over Natasha Cloud. And when I watched Phoenix, I felt last year that it was a bunch of young players who were under the wing of veterans who, weren't necessarily they don't really have the right to do some of the things that they were doing. And it's very obvious that Phoenix was under Diana Taurasi's thumb. Good, better, and different. It was very obvious. And I believe there has to be a veteran point guard in that organization for Phoenix to do better. So last year, Shook Sutton, who played in Texas, Mariah Jefferson played at Connecticut. Mariah Jefferson, a solid pro. Shook Sutton, coming back from overseas, got a great opportunity to go into training camp and really helped Phoenix. And I think they got to see what their young point guards could be. But if Phoenix wants to do something this year, which it looks like they do, they needed a veteran point guard. And so I like the move of bringing Natasha Cloud there. She's going to help them immediately. I was going to say Final Four, but WNBA Finals championship experience, led All-Stars with the Mystics, needed a fresh start in a different way. And I love that move. So that is Natasha Cloud at Phoenix. They want to get better faster. And with the new ownership in Phoenix, they have the money to do that. Obviously, there's always going to be cap considerations, but Phoenix is not an organization that is going to be cheap. They're getting a new practice facility, and they just got one 2 or 3 years ago. So they have new ownership who's ready to shake things up. So I love the moves out there. Then we've got, who else do we got? Los Angeles. I don't know what LA is doing, but obviously they're rebuilding and retooling and remixing. I don't know what their approach is yet because I haven't talked to those leaders out there lately. Did a couple of their games on television last year, but I do know that they lost Nneka Ogwumike. What they have left. People always talk about what they lost, but let's talk about what they have left. They've got they lost Jordan Canada, so they've lost Canada and they lost Ogwumike. What they have coming and what they have coming back is, let's see, my girl from Connecticut. Shout out to her. She's gonna kill me before you forgot my name. You didn't think baby girl, there's a lot of names going on in my head for sure. All right, moving on to the Chicago Sky. Let's start and remind y'all that Chicago has a new coach in Hall of Famer, former Louisiana Tech All-American, Olympian, all that good stuff. Coach Teresa Weatherspoon is out there in Chi-Town. So let's remind y'all of that feel-good story in Chicago. Now that Skylar Diggins is no longer a consideration out there, because that was certainly one of the places that I had on my draft board, my free agency board, was to try to get Skylar Diggins to Chicago. They have swapped in Lindsey Allen, who you guys remember is a point guard, and Minnesota to replace Williams. But that puts Dana Evans out there as an opportunity to earn a starting spot. I love Dana Evans. Dana Evans is a dog. Dana Evans is extremely intelligent and tough at the point guard position and can play swing or point guard. So I think the point guard situation is in good hands, and I know Teresa Weatherspoon has had the opportunity over the last few months to really indoctrinate the point guard, because she was one of the point guards on the Mount Rushmore women's basketball point guards. She's made the opportunity available for Dana Evans to step right in and to be amazing at that. What you're going to see in Chicago, and I said this when Teresa was hired as their coach, is you're going to see a different kind of presence, because what Hall of Fame coaches and players understand is that when your leader from the point guard is a strong leader, a powerful leader from a passion and emotional and spiritual standpoint, your team has a better chance at winning. Let's, even if we just go halfway through the league and think about point guards who had really great presence. Natasha Cloud, we just finished talking about her in Washington. Who else? Big presence. Not just good players, big presence. Chelsea Gray at Las Vegas. So when you have a point guard who has not just skills and ability, but presence, your team is in a good situation. And I see that in Chicago. So we'll see what they do. Got to put my glasses on so I can actually see. I can be cute, but let's actually be functional as well. The Dallas Wings. Greg Bibb, who is executive there, president of the organization, says that he likes the core of the Dallas Wings. I happen to agree with that. Arike Ogunbowale, Satu Sabali. That's one of the best starting fives in the WNBA. You guys remember that the Dallas Wings they were one step away from the finals this year. So the core is intact. And now what Dallas wants to do is kind of find those complementary pieces around to put those people in a better situation to get to the finals. I will say that I believe one of the most important things for the Dallas Wings is making sure that you have competent folks behind your superstars, not just people who give them minutes rest, because for the most part, they're not going to rest a whole lot. But people who come into the game behind Ogunbowale or behind Natasha Howard or behind Satu Sabali, and who are giving you meaningful minutes and meaningful contributions on the stat sheet. So whether that's intangibles like offensive boards or defensive stoppers, they have to have very specific reasons for being on the floor, and they have to be extremely good at it. Case in point, Las Vegas Aces. Starting five, beastly, but you got Clark coming off the bench. You got Kayla George, who, when she was in the game, as I said in one of my videos from the finals, like, who is that? Because she never played, but she was ready. Hit some big threes, shot some air balls in the finals, but hit some big threes. So that's what I'm talking about. You got to have specific talents and skill sets when you have a team that's extremely strong on the front line from a standpoint of the first five. You got to have people who are coming to that next two or three, can't just be minute resters. They can't be, hey, let me give Arike a blow for 2 minutes at the end of the second quarter or the first quarter. They've got to be able to do something. So I think Dallas is in good shape. Can their mentality stay where it needs to stay? Is Arike coming in as a person who wants to get better as a leader? Has her game developed? And yes, all-star games do need to develop. What area of her game is Arike going to develop? We'll see that in the preseason. But right now, I do think Dallas is, if I were looking at kind of contenders preseason, I would put Dallas right back where they were this year, and that is very close to getting to the finals. Let's see who else we got here. Phoenix, Minnesota, talk a little bit about them. New York Liberty. They've been kind of quiet on free agency, and they had, everybody coming back. If I were New York, I would be looking to insert a point guard who gives you something different than Courtney Vandersloot does. So Sloot, solid point guard, but mid-30s. And it's time now to be thinking about who's going to be stepping in and playing point guard. And you need to start developing that person now, getting them meaningful minutes now. But I also think you need to get someone who's different from what Courtney gives you. Sometimes coaches and organizations will have some of the same kinds of players. I felt like for a while there, Atlanta had 10 of the same kinds of players. And you got to get people who give you some different stuff. Atlanta's not doing that now, but a couple years ago, that I couldn't tell who was on the floor because they were all the same kind of players. So same thing for a point guard in New York's system. They got exposed in a couple of ways in the finals against Las Vegas, and I think one of those is that they didn't have the ability to swing Courtney Vandersloot to off guard and have a point guard who could complement what those other four people on the floor gave them. So I see New York. I don't know if they're going to make any major moves, but I do believe they should be thinking about who they're going to be grooming for their point guard in the future and getting that person some playing time now. Indiana, Caitlin Clark is coming out. Okay, Caitlin Clark is coming out. So, but Caitlin Clark alone will not get to the WNBA finals and will not be able to help Indiana be the only thing that Indiana has to get to a WNBA championship. You got Aaliyah Boston there. But what does Indiana really need, right? What do they need? They are going to be needing someone who, for me, is more of a slasher. You've got you've got Kelsey Mitchell, Ohio State player, baller, shooter. Kelsey Mitchell is going to be there as far as we know, but what you need is someone who is just going to be out there to shoot, and that's where Caitlin Clark comes in. Caitlin Clark is not going to beat a whole lot of WNBA players to the hole. She's not. But she can flat out shoot, and that's what's going to open up the inside game more for Boston. She's not going to give me many double teams and triple teams if she's on the same side as Caitlin Clark. You got Clark on one wing. You got Kelsey Mitchell on the other wing. You got Aaliyah Boston. That's the making of a solid and deadly and extremely competitive team and franchise. So I like that, but I also believe you got to get players you got to look at players who are able to not just get to the hole, but who can shoot the mid-range and the jumper, because sometimes you can't get all the way to the hole in the WNBA because the post players are there. People are blocking your shots. It's difficult to do that depending on your offensive set. But I do think that's what Indiana needs to do. Did I leave out Jordan Canada? Jordan Canada's going to Atlanta. That is a huge, huge move. Canada's leaving the Los Angeles Sparks to go to the Atlanta Dream. I love that for Ari McDonald. I love that move. I think Ari's going to fit in, as I said in my previous video, to Los Angeles. And I know Jordan's going to love Atlanta, and she's going to be playing for a point guard coach. So I see her getting extremely nice minutes, probably going to start in Atlanta. And yeah, it's going to be a nice combination. So you got Canada, you got Ryan Howard, Cherokee. Oh God, I can't think of her name. Cherokee? Okay, y'all know who I'm talking about. you got Atlanta's gonna be nice. Atlanta is gonna be nice with the moves that they made in free agency. So let's see if I get everybody. Las Vegas, what is there to say about the champions in Las Vegas? They're gonna get a couple of pieces to make sure that they stay at championship level. They picked up Megan Gustafson. They ended their run with Kayla George, and of course, Elena Coates is no longer there, but I like what Becky Hammon does with her team. She understands there's a unique chemistry that they have in the Aces, and great coaches understand that you don't mess with great chemistry. So the pieces that you bring in have to be very complementary to what you already have. So you got to balance that. Hey, we got some physical pieces that we need to make us better as a team on the court, but that piece also has to work with the chemistry that we're brewing in the lab. So I think I hit everybody in this video. Let's make sure. I think I hit everybody. If I didn't, I'll come back and do a different video. New York, Minnesota, Phoenix. Yeah. I may not have talked about Los Angeles a whole lot. We'll talk about Los Angeles. Big move in Los Angeles. They acquired Kia Nurse from Seattle. I like that because Kia Nurse is a Nneka Ogwumike kind of player. And when I say that, I certainly don't mean that they are the same. I mean, bigger forward, can play 3 positions at least. Nice outside shot, probably a better outside shooter than Nneka Ogwumike was, but a durable player who's going to give them some leadership and the ability to mix it up. So I like the pickup of getting Kia Nurse. Will Ari McDonald be able to give Los Angeles what Jordan Canada was able to do, especially in this last season? I think it will look differently because Ari McDonald is a smaller guard, more of a playmaker, get to the hole, dish it off, drop dimes, but she is an outstanding point guard. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Ari McDonald is able to do in the Los Angeles regime. So that's it. I think I hit all 12 teams in this free agency roundup. We'll keep this conversation going. If you got some thoughts, let me know what you think about the moves that have been made in the WNBA so far, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks Thanks for tuning in to Women's Basketball TV with Fran Harris, the most provocative and entertaining women's basketball show on earth. Be sure to click that like, share and notification button so you don't miss a moment. We'll see you tomorrow.